I'm Ryan. I'm a science teacher.
I'm Cheryl, and I slept through science.
Each episode will tackle a science question you may have learned in school, but can't quite remember or fully explain.
And I'll take the risk of asking the dumb questions so that we can all understand the science we slept through.
The bell has rung. Let's get started. Welcome to lesson 22. We are in our biology unit. Cheryl,
Yes?
do you have another biology question this week?
I sure do.
Okay.
For our biology unit, I have a very intriguing question for you.
I'm noticing something unique about the way you're talking here. What's your question?
Well, I want to talk about eyes.
Okay.
Ryan, why are my eyes blue?
Why are your eyes blue?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you think your eyes are blue?
Okay, so I do remember learning. This is something I remember from science class, actually, Ryan.
Hey, you didn't sleep through it.
I know. I remember recessive and dominant traits or genes. I forget if the gene itself is recessive or dominant, or if we're saying it's a trait of the gene. I don't remember the phrasing on that exactly. I know that blue eyes are recessive. And what that means is that if a brown-eyed person and a blue-eyed person had a child, that child would have either a higher likelihood of having brown-eyed or just have brown eyes. There's I remember putting them into 4 boxes and saying these are the odds essentially of different traits being passed down.
Okay.
Based on what we were doing lots of things with combinations of letters, and there were capital letters and lowercase letters, and the lowercase letter is the blue eyes. And for
Do you remember
me,
what that means? The uppercase and the
uppercase was the dominant.
Okay.
And so I think it meant if it was present at all, then it was going to win.
Okay.
Something like that. And then I found it interesting. Well, so both my parents have blue eyes, and my sisters and I all have blue eyes.
Okay.
So I guess, is that the only way I would end up with blue eyes? Or if just my mom had blue eyes, is there a chance I could have gotten them? If both my parents had brown eyes, is there any chance I would have blue eyes at all? Or is it nope, you will definitely have the dominant thing and not the recessive?
And what do you think to each of those questions?
I think if both my parents had brown eyes, there's no way I would have blue eyes.
Okay.
But I think if just one parent had blue eyes, that there's a small chance I could have had them. But more likely I would have had brown eyes.
Okay.
If 2 blue-eyed people had a kid, could they have a brown-eyed kid? Or is it 2 blue-eyed people will definitely pass down blue eyes? And also, what the heck? How is that in a gene at all? Where is that in your body? Is that in your eyes? And how does but that's in your DNA somewhere, I guess, which means it's as you're creating a kid, it's somewhere in their code, because it's in your code. How is it in your code? And how is all that code in a tiny little egg or a sperm in the first place? Anyway, I have a lot of questions.
You do. I feel like we're spiraling into another lesson here.
We may be. Maybe just a mention of that would help me.
Yeah. No. I gotcha.
Cool.
Any other thoughts about blue eyes or traits or genes or anything else?
Well, I know that I'm more sensitive to the sun because and I think that's related to it being recessive, is that it is weaker.
All right. That's a lot of good thoughts. There is a lot here, Cheryl.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about. I will do my best to stay focused. First thing is you asked the question near the end, how is it that all this info can be in a gene and DNA and all of that can fit in a cell and all of that stuff?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the very short answer. And if it is not satisfying, then I think we'll need another lesson.
Great. That sounds good.
Basically, it's in a DNA is a molecule that has code or instructions for making everything you need for everything to be you. And the molecule is relatively small and it's all coiled up and wrapped up in these things called chromosomes that you've probably heard of. And when it's all wrapped up like that, it's able to fit in a really, really small space.
Like a computer.
Sure.
Well, computer chips, they're so small and they have all this information on them.
Yes, that is true. Sure, we'll go with that.
Great.
All right, let's talk more about eyes, shall we?
Okay.
You mentioned dominant and recessive traits, which is awesome. Yes, there are one way of looking at genetics is with dominant and recessive traits. Technically, not everything is either dominant or recessive. There's more complicated ways of doing it, but a lot of things are dominant or recessive. And it is, you can say a trait, or you could say a gene.
Okay.
Or if you wanted to get even fancier and more accurate, you could say an allele.
Ooh.
Does that word sound familiar to you at all?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit.
Allele bit?
Yeah.
An allele is a version of a gene.
Okay.
A gene is a region of DNA that codes for a particular protein. We typically would talk about, let's say, an eye color gene, but you can have different versions of that gene. You could have a brown version and a blue version and a green version and a hazel version. Each of those versions is considered a different allele.
Got it.
And now, of course, I have to walk back everything that I just said. Not everything, but because technically in eye color is actually what we call polygenetic, which means there's more than one gene that leads to eye color. It's more complicated. We are going to treat it from here on out as if it's one gene because it will be the easiest to understand that way.
Okay.
But know that there's actually multiple genes that all interact. And that's why not all blue eyes are the same color blue. Not all brown eyes are the same color brown, and so on. There's different shades and things because there's other things interacting with them.
Whoa, it gets that specific?
It can, yeah.
Wow.
It's
That's really
cool.
interesting.
I mean, I think so. All right. You also talked about how dominant traits win and the recessive traits lose.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more what you mean by win and lose?
Well, if they're in a fight together, the dominant one's going to win. And what I mean by a fight is if two people, one person with brown eyes and one person with blue eyes, have a baby, the brown eyes is the dominant one, and it will, I'm trying to think of how to say it. I want to say like it will go towards that, but that even sounds weird.
If it's a choice between the two, the dominant
Yes.
one is the one that gets selected or chosen.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And that is mostly accurate.
Oh.
But it's a little bit more subtle than that. I'm going to use eyes as an example to try and explain it. It depends exactly what's going on. For eye color, and we're just going to talk about brown and blue, because again, there's a lot of other pieces. Brown eyes, like I have, are caused by a protein a pigment called melanin. You've probably heard of melanin.
Oh, yeah, like about skin.
Exactly. It's just a pigment, and pigment is just a molecule that has a color.
Oh, okay.
That gives things a color. That's what pigment means. And melanin is the one that has the sort of brownish, those kind of tints of things. And the more of it you have, the darker that color is. The less of it you have, the lighter that color is. That's the same pigment that makes my eyes brown. That also gives my skin the color that it has. And the gene that makes that, for me, makes a whole bunch of that brown pigment in my irises, the part of my eyes that have color.
Okay.
The blue eye gene is actually not really a different gene. It's actually a mutation that prevents melanin from being made in the eye.
Yeah.
You are not making melanin in your eyes.
Or really on my skin either.
Well, you also, yes. Which also, if you think about it, that makes some sense that there may be some connections between, generally, you have fairer skinned people that have blue eyes. Not always, but in general, that tends to be a trend. They just have less melanin production in their body overall.
Yeah, I'm not at the albino level of things, but I'm like on my way there.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And so what is actually happening is there's actually nothing that you do not have blue pigment that makes your eyes blue. The blue comes from the light entering your eyes, not running into any brown pigment and interacting with what's in your eyes that I have the exact same things. And your eyes are blue for more or less the same reason that the sky is blue.
Are you serious?
The light is coming through and it scatters on the stuff that's in your eyes, very similarly to the way that it scatters in the air. And if I just didn't have the brown pigment, it's a layer in front of what's behind, my eyes would be blue as well.
So I have clear eyes.
Yes. Sure. All of that to say, that's why it's recessive. Because if there's any sort of instruction for make the melanin, your eyes will be brown. They won't be blue.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And brown is dominant because if you have that, you have the instructions for making melanin. Therefore, you will have brown pigments. Whereas if you do not have the instructions to do it, you won't have it.
Wow. That's really cool.
It's you're like processing and taking it in there.
That just feels so different than even at how I remember being taught it. Not that I have like a perfect memory of how I was taught, but it felt more like this is the instruction for blue and this is the instruction for brown, but the blue are lowercase. And so, yeah.
And that's because that's the simplest way to do it. And there are other traits where that is the case. It just depends. It just depends on what the thing is. Sometimes there are two different colors that are produced. Sometimes there's one that is and one that isn't. It just kind of depends on the trait you're looking at. And that leads us into, well, how do you know what you're going to have and what you're not going to have? And you talked about the 4 boxes.
Yeah. I remember those boxes.
And you're remembering correctly. There's the 4 boxes. It's called a Punnett square. Does that sound familiar?
There's a name.
Yeah.
It's not just like my teacher making it up.
No, it's a very standard thing. And in fact, this is what I find so funny. That is the lesson that I taught in biology today was Punnett squares.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so you're like, yeah, I know the 4 boxes.
I know the 4 boxes. You're like the 4 boxes. I was like, oh yeah, no, I can do that. I actually just did that today. As a matter of fact, why don't I share my screen with you and do a couple of Punnett squares?
Yes.
All righty. I'm going to go ahead and draw here. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Punnett square is a square with 4 smaller squares inside it.
Checks out.
Checks
like
out.
A really easy Sudoku puzzle.
Exactly. You mentioned as well, dominant traits are written with an uppercase letter and the recessive traits are written with a lowercase letter.
Mm-hmm.
For this, we're going to use B. B works really well because it stands for brown and blue. But
fancy.
Regardless, you always use the same letter, even if the 2 words are not the same.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to say a capital B is going to equal brown because that's the dominant trait. And a lowercase b is going to equal blue because that's the recessive trait.
Okay.
All right. You were talking about all of your family both of your parents have blue eyes. Would it even be possible for your siblings to have any of you have been born with brown eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Here's how we figure that out. One of your parents, we put their 2 genes, because everybody has 2 copies of each gene, one that they got from their mom and one that they got from their dad.
Oh, I was going to guess it's like a backup external hard drive, but I guess not.
Not necessarily. It can be, but not always. We put those 2 genes at the top for either mom or dad.
Yep.
Yep. And then we do the other ones along the side of the box. Then you just match up from the top and from the side, which 2 come together. And this is going to be little b, little b. And as a matter of fact, these ones are all going to be little b, because those are the only possible copies of the gene that each of your parents can give to you. They don't have the instructions for making the melanin in your eyes, so they can't pass it on to you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. However, I have brown eyes.
Congrats.
Thank you. Which means I have at least one capital B.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And one of the questions you asked was, would it ever be possible for 2 brown-eyed parents to have a blue-eyed kid?
Yeah.
Right? Let me go ahead and I'll make a new Punnett square.
This is also a good opportunity to mention to those of you listening to our podcast auditorially that you can also find us on YouTube. And on YouTube, you can see Ryan sharing his screen and just like a screen full of the letter B. It's pretty riveting
squares.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yep. All right. If someone had one copy of the gene that makes melanin, the brown pigment, and one copy, of the gene that doesn't make the pigment, which would lead to blue eyes.
Oh, so they could have a blue-eyed kid. I'll tell you how.
Yeah,
because if the other parent had one gene that makes melanin, which is a capital B, it would go on the left-hand side. And one gene that does not make melanin, it would be lowercase b. Then when you start to match these up in these 4 squares, you would match up the 2 capital B's together.
Yep.
And then on the top right, you would match a uppercase B with a lowercase b.
Yep.
On the bottom left, you'd match an uppercase B with a lowercase b. But then those 2 little lack of melanin B's would be buddies.
They would. In which case you could have a blue-eyed kid.
Interesting.
Yeah. And this is where the other thing you talked about was the odds of having things. This is where those odds come from.
Got it.
Right? So there would be a 1 in 4 chance that these 2 parents, if they had one copy of the brown gene and one copy of the blue gene, right? One that does make melanin and one that doesn't. If they both had that, they would have a 1 in 4 chance, or a 25% chance, that they could have a kid with blue eyes.
Nice.
Making sense?
Yes.
Also, does it sound vaguely familiar?
Oh, yeah. This is feels very familiar. I wonder if it's because of more interactive activity. I don't know why it stuck with me a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It tends to be something, I think, that people remember from school, the Punnett squares. And I don't know if it's because it's interesting and people are interested in genes and how we get our traits and those sorts of things, or if it's because, the square is really visual. I'm not really sure what it is, but it tends to be something that, people come up with and remember quite a bit.
That's so cool. But what I didn't know was that I just didn't have melanin in my eyes. And that's so interesting.
Yeah. In fact, what we think it is there's 2 kind of primary genes, the one that makes melanin and then another one that controls the gene that makes melanin.
Oh.
And if you have blue eyes, the one that controls it turns off the gene that actually makes melanin. So it actually stops it from actually working.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it's
even
complex
weirder.
stuff. Oh, it is. It's weird and it's cool and it's interesting, which is why I love science.
Nice.
And with that, it's now time for your quiz, Cheryl.
I think I would prefer to not have one. That's
Well,
what I
I
think.
think it's time for the quiz.
Okay, fine.
First question. What is the difference between a dominant and a recessive trait?
Now, I just want to say that it wins again. But pretty much if there is a dominant trait present, then it will dictate the outcome, or it will dictate like how
Mhm.
the DNA is.
Or what you see as a result of the DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
was saying. That's
yeah.
it. That's it. Yeah. Okay. In eye color, why is blue recessive and brown dominant?
Blue eyes are simply the lack of melanin. And so if there's melanin present, then there's melanin present. And so then you won't see the reflection of the sky or whatever the heck in your eyes. You'll see this like layer of melanin instead.
There you go. Just for the record, it's not the reflection of the sky. It's the same thing that causes the sky to be blue also causes your eyes to be blue.
Oh, I was thinking it's the whole like, well, why is the water blue? It's because the sky is blue. And why is the sky blue? It's because the water's blue.
Maybe we need
Big
a
up.
question, why is the sky blue?
I've been told this though, Ryan. This is like a thing. So I'm very excited to talk about that in a future episode because I
Okay.
feel like it's a weird common knowledge thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yep. Okay. We'll have to do that one too. Question number 3. If one parent has 2 copies of the dominant trait, dominant gene, and the other parent has 2 copies of the recessive trait, okay, for eye color. So one parent has 2 browns, the other one has 2 blues.
Yeah.
Would any of the kids be able to have blue eyes ever? Would there be any chance? Why?
No, because as you do those combinations
Mm-hmm.
of those 2 letters together, like every combination will still have that dominant capital B because it will be in all the boxes.
It would be in all the boxes.
Yeah.
Just to kind of help a little bit, let's do one of those boxes.
Okay.
Just to make sure if there's anybody who's watching us, they can kind of see what we're talking about. What would we put at the top of the box?
Well, which parent do you want?
Either one, doesn't matter.
Dominant parent.
Okay,
E
so
and B over each of the 2 columns.
they're all B's.
Oh.
How about capital B and capital
Yes,
B, or big B
yes.
and big B?
And then on the left-hand side, next to each of the rows, B and B, but this time it's lowercase.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And when we combine them, what do we end
They're
up
all
with?
the same.
Which
They're
is?
all a capital B followed by a lowercase b.
Yep. They're all exactly the same. Well, and if they have those little B's, then why wouldn't we have any blue eyes?
Well, I already answered that question in a previous one, so C above.
But if you were to shorten it and just do it real quickly here, you would say?
I would say that capital B represents melanin present, which means you have colored contacts over your eyes.
Yep. Or you could also say that it's dominant.
Sure.
Over the little b as well.
Yeah.
Okay. For the last quiz question, I have something extra special for you, Cheryl.
Oh boy.
Yep. Because I am doing this in my class right now, I pulled up an actual question from my class.
Aww, cute.
And of course, because it's my class, the entire assignment, and this is the one they will be doing in class tomorrow, it's all Star Wars themed.
Yay!
So You can pick. Do you want the question about Chewbacca, the question about Grogu, or the question about Anakin?
Oh, Chewbacca.
Chewbacca.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I thought that might be the one, and I think you'll like this one anyway. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
Chewbacca recently met Susie Baka at a dance.
Wait, does that mean they're cousins because both of them have the
No,
last name of Baka?
Well, it's not a last name. It's
Okay.
one word. So
Okay.
no, just go with it. Just go with it. Chewbacca has 2 different copies of the gene, one for brown hair and one for red hair. Brown hair is dominant over red hair.
Okay.
Susie Baka has red hair.
Okay.
Tracking so far?
Yep.
Okay. If they end up getting together and having a kid, what are the chances that they would have a red-haired kid?
50-50.
Ooh, okay. That was fast. Let's do a Punnett square.
Okay.
And why don't you sort of talk us through how you knew that?
Chewbacca has a capital. Are we doing B still? You said it's always the same letter, right?
It's the same letter between capital and lowercase, but you can technically pick whatever letter you want. You could do R's. You could
Let's do
T's.
R's just so it looks different.
Okay.
Than the I one. So
yeah.
Chewbacca would have one capital R and one lowercase r.
Okay.
And then Susie Baka would have a lowercase r and a lowercase r, meaning that both of the boxes in the left-hand column would have one capital R and one lowercase r, and both the ones in the right-hand column would have both lowercase r's. 50-50.
Look at that. Wow, Cheryl, you are a Punnett square master.
And apparently Chewbacca is pretty smooth, so good for him.
Yeah. Yep. way to go, Chewbacca. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's lesson. So why don't you pack up your stuff and get ready for my closing remarks. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at I Slept Through Science, or on Twitter at Slept Science.
If you have dumb science questions like I do, please send them to us. You can email us at isleptthroughscience@gmail.com, or you can even send us a voice memo and we'll play it on the podcast.
Please rate and review our podcast to tell other people what you think about it, subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode, and share about our podcast on social media.
Thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. Okay, great. Thanks. Bye.
The bell doesn't dismiss you. I dismiss you.